Continuing on the Take Command podcast, time to welcome in today's guest, ESPN NFL draft analyst Matt Miller. Matt, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be on with you guys. Unfortunately, it's draft season already for Commanders fans, but it's good news for people in my line of work, right? You know, that we it's early to mid-December, we're getting called up. I'll tell you, when I was at Bleacher Report for a decade, and it'd always be funny in those editorial meetings. Every week I'd pop in like to the Zoom call and be like, okay, are Browns fans talking about the draft yet? You know, so it's like, it's not Browns fans anymore, but it's like, I always knew like, okay, you know, it's like week 10, Browns fans are talking about the draft. It's time to call Matt into the lineup. So it's a good time of year for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a good time for year for us because getting you on is, I'm sure, much easier now than it will be in like February and March. So we'll take the exclusivity as everyone else cares about, you know, the playoffs. So Logan asked me a question to start the podcast that I thought was actually very interesting, and I don't know in terms of your background and how you kind of approach what you do on the media side of this, the answer to it. But he asked, you know, hey, does Matt do more scouting or more talent evaluation? Talent evaluation being like, hey, what's on tape? Scouting being all of the other stuff that goes into a player profile. So how do you approach the job, and how does that change from now at the end of college football season until the NFL draft?
No, that's such a great question. And I almost wish there was you could have like a resume on social media that says like, hey, here's how I do things, because that really like leads to a bigger jumping off point even of like, how do you do a mock draft? Is it what you would do, or is it what you think teams will do? And so it's just this like philosophical question that we could spend hours talking about. So short answer, both. And I came up in this industry. I always wanted to be a scout. I wanted to work for a team and scout players, you know, and I think that's why journalism always appealed to me, because you're trying to find out the truth about a player. And so I still approach the job the same way of, you know, I'm going to watch every game that I possibly can, understanding that there are about 700 players that we have to be aware of, right? I'm not going to lie to you guys and pretend like I've watched 12 games on Duke's right guard. No, I haven't, you know, but, you know, quarterbacks, especially, you watch every game. And then for everyone else, you prioritize the best you can, understanding that you're a one-person scouting department. So try to watch as much as I can. But, you know, I've been in this business 13 years. And so I've seen it change. And one thing that has helped me over those 13 years is that I do now have, you know, connections with different teams, whether it be area scouts, director, player personnel, general managers, you know, college coaches, where you can say, hey, help me narrow this list down, because it's impossible to watch everyone. One of the greatest things that has happened in my career is going to ESPN, where there's a system of, if I want to watch every throw Caleb Williams has made in the red zone, I can click a couple buttons and have those ready. You know, before that, it was, God, how am I going to watch all these guys? So just having access to better technology, and you know, the NCAA is very protective about their game film. So even just having access to that is huge. So I try to do both. You talk to scouts, talk to coaches, find out what's going on behind the scenes, so that can better inform me, you know, based on what I've seen from the players.
And then, like, to Craig's question, like, how does that change over the next couple of months, really? You know what I'm saying? Because, like, I feel like there's always this, like, there's the end of season kind of mock draft formula where you kind of see the same 32 guys. Then all of a sudden, Daniel Jeremiah will put his out. You know, he's pretty dialed in. And there's 5 or 6 names on there. You're like, who the heck are these guys? Because he's been talking and he's been kind of doing that scouting process. How does that change for you over the next couple of months?
Yeah, so I actually just put my first mock draft out this week, and I like to think I had some names in there that the general draft fan maybe wasn't familiar with, like Tyrion Arnold from Alabama is my number 1 corner. I try not to absorb a lot of draft content because I love Daniel Jeremiah, I love Mel Kiper Jr., but I don't want their rankings getting in my head, so I try not to look at those things and just have, you know, hey, here's who I think are the guys. So like Tyrion Arnold, my number 1 corner, Enos Rakestraw from Missouri, my number 2 corner. So like, that's just based on what I've seen and conversations I've had with scouts. You're right. January, when we all get to the Senior Bowl, everything is going to get blown up because you start having more of those in-person conversations. I was on the phone with the general manager 2 nights ago, and he was driving to have dinner with all his scouts. You know, he's like, oh, all our scouts are in. let me run some names by you, because he's an NFL general manager and he's getting caught up because he's got his own to do during the season, right? And so it's like, it's so much easier to do a deep dive after January 13th because the deadline for underclassmen has passed. So we're not worried about Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck anymore. They're going back to school. Let me focus on Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy. So you're able to cut your list. You're able to see, okay, who's going to the Shrine Bowl? Who's going to the Senior Bowl? Peek behind the curtain. I prioritize those guys because, if you don't get a Shrine invite or a Senior Bowl invite, the chances of you being drafted are really slim. And, that is one area my job has changed a lot. With the TV side of things, day 3 of the draft, I'm going to spend so much time studying those players. And so if you don't make the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, Combine, like if you don't get an invite to one of those 3 things, the chance that I'm going to do a deep dive on you is pretty small unless someone vouches for you. So that's another part of it, Logan. Like you start to just cut your list, and those events help. So it's not even just, it's like, oh man, like DJ put out his top 32. Let me go look at that. I mean, it's more of like scouts start talking and you're like, wait, why didn't I have Xavier Watts from Notre Dame higher?
Right.
Players like that. So it's more conversations like that happening.
Interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned you just put out your first mock. I'm guessing you did this before Monday Night Football and never expected the Giants to win because they wound up at that 4th pick in your mock. And then all of a sudden everyone wakes up the next morning. It's like, wait, they won. They should be 5th. Which I only bring up not to be like, hey, what happened there? But because I think it becomes a very interesting question if Jaden Daniels, who for you is quarterback 3, is available at 4 for Washington, which based off that Monday night result is where they would pick. So when you look at what Sam Howell has been as a pro so far, and if you're that GM making the decision, whoever that will ultimately be for Washington, assuming they have massive changes that we all expect, like how many quarterbacks would you be considering and really wanting to look at as this guy could be better than what I think Sam Howell can be better than, which is kind of asking you 2 questions in one, your top quarterbacks and also what you think of Sam.
I was about to say, man, that's not a fair question because, he's doing his draft stuff and now you're like, I got to do the eval on Sam Howell too. So mock drafts suck, by the way. So good for you. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I love mock drafts though. That's my favorite part of the job, honestly.
Seriously? You're
hard
a psycho.
To do. Yeah, but I love doing those. So Craig, I was not the biggest Sam Howell guy. I had a 3rd round grade on him. Commanders fans got pissed because someone found like my eval of like my comp for him coming out of college was Colt McCoy, which to me was a compliment. Colt was a damn good college quarterback. He just had a shoulder injury that ruined his arm, but he played in the NFL for like 14 years. So it wasn't the knock that people wanted it to be. So I was not, I had a 3rd round grade on Sam Howell. I think he's played above my expectations this year to the point that you have to do that linear evaluation. Okay, Caleb Williams, let's evaluate Sam Howell versus where we think Caleb can be. Also with the understanding Sam's 2 years into a 4-year deal. So you have to think about, we're going to have to pay this guy if he's the guy. Same with Drake May, same with Jaden Daniels, same with JJ McCarthy. My philosophy this year, whether they're in the 4th, 5th slot, somewhere right there, is if it's not Caleb Williams, you build around Sam Howell. Like Caleb's the only guy that I would say, let's see what we can get for Sam Howell. Let's call New England. Let's call Atlanta. Let's see, what kind of draft capital can we get? And, I think the other thing that you have to do, so I would start end of the year. You got a new general manager, new head coach. The first thing I'm doing is calling Ryan Poles, the general manager in Chicago, and saying, do you believe in Justin Fields? Is Justin Fields in 3 first-round picks? Do you believe in that more than you believe in Caleb Williams? Because if so, we'll give you the Bryce Young package. We'll come up to 1 and draft Caleb Williams. I think, why not call him? He traded out of it last year. Why not call and say, hey, Justin Fields looked pretty good since that thumb injury. What if we give you?
So just real quick, you like Fields more than Howell, like by that much?
No, not by that. No, what I'm saying is, if you're Chicago, can you talk Chicago into keeping Justin Fields with 3 more with you giving them draft picks? I like Justin as a runner more than Sam Howell. I think Howell has been better as a passer. And so it's just it goes to that, how do you want to build your team? And I think for Chicago and Washington, those are huge questions. So, no, I wouldn't kick Sam Howell to the curb for Drake May. I just wouldn't. Same for, I love Jaden Daniels. I'm a huge Jaden Daniels fan. That conversation might be a little more interesting because I think, Drake's 20 years old. JJ McCarthy's 21 years old. These guys, I don't know that they're ready to step in and be CJ Stroud, so there's going to be a developmental period where it does go to would we rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. with Sam Howell? Would we rather have Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt with Sam Howell? How much better can Sam look? And, that's really one of those things, like, unless you're in that building, seeing his work ethic and practice habits and film study, like, it would be disingenuous for me to sit here having watched, 12 Commanders games and say, no, like, Sam Howell's not the guy, or yeah, Sam Howell's the guy, because I think so much of it is going to be what's happening behind closed doors that can make you believe he can continue to get better.
Yeah, and so one of the things you said there that I thought was interesting is, like, if you were to tier, let's say, your top 15 guys, like, who's tier one? Because everyone does these linear drafts, and it makes sense. Like, it's a linear big board. But, like, I don't think of the draft that way, because it's like, who are the best players? Are they in the same tier? And like, you kind of said something there about the quarterbacks, which I thought was interesting. Like, there was one guy that's kind of head and shoulders above everybody else. How do those other quarterbacks shake out in comparison to, like, a Marvin Harrison Jr. or the edge rusher from UCLA? Or, one of these top tier tackles, right? So can you kind of give us some insight on that?
Yeah, I think there's a clear top tier this year. I would say that's Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Olu Fashanu. Like, I feel comfortable saying those guys are in a group by themselves. Yeah, like, they're in most drafts, they would be the number one overall player. It's like, they're that good. Even like, if Caleb Williams had been in the draft last year, he would have gone first overall. And that's, we could say what we want about, did the Panthers make the right call with Bryce Young? He would have gone first overall. I think, the quarterbacks are always going to get inflated. Most drafts, Olu Fashanu would be a number one overall player. Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a number one overall player, even if they're not the first pick, because we understand quarterbacks go first, but they would be the top ranked player. I think after that, there's a drop off. After that, you get into Drake May, quarterback North Carolina. You get into Joe Alt, the left tackle from Notre Dame. I think that's where you see Leatu Latu, the DN from UCLA that you mentioned. Medicals are going to be huge for him, to where we could be talking about a top 10 pick, or we could be talking about a second round pick with him. Dallas Turner from Alabama, pass rusher, is right in that group as well, I would say. Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. You got three wide receivers I would put in there: Keon Coleman, Florida State; Malik Neighbors, LSU; and Roma Dunze from Washington. And then after that, you get to another tier after that. So, like, guys that I will have a true first round grade on, it's probably like 11 or 12 this year. I think in a quote unquote normal year, you're probably going to have 15, 16. So in terms of, like, true blue chip talent, and I should have mentioned, I would put Jaden Daniels right in that group too, probably at the tail end of it. True first round grades, those are the guys I would put in there.
In that tier 2 group, you're saying, with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah.
So
I'm a Jaden Daniels fan, guys.
It's interesting.
We'll see what happens with whomever gets hired there and what the offense looks like. But no player improved more in college football this year than Jaden Daniels, and I love to see that from quarterbacks. Like, 2022, he was good, but he wasn't this. And you see the work he put in, and then you're like, damn, that dude took off. And it's not like artificial. He got better at certain skill sets that are obvious to see on film, and that's where you get pretty excited.
So let me ask you that kind of follow-up to go deeper on that, though, because I feel like sometimes that's a little scary, is like what actually happens is a guy figures out college football, and it's like, oh, is he ever going to be able to make the next step and figure out the NFL? So how do you try to differentiate a guy who figured out college football versus a guy that made a huge, significant leap like Jaden Daniels did that can carry that kind of improvement into the league?
What helps is when you play in the SEC West. So if you're at LSU, like, come on, you're not playing. It's not at Colorado, like, you're playing the best of the best in the SEC week in and week out. And we were talking about corners earlier, Tyrion Arnold, Enos Rakestraw, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Kamari Lassiter. There are just four corners right there from the SEC. They're going to be first round picks. So, like, you're seeing the best talent. And so I think you always have that worry. Hey, this guy's 22. He's playing against 19-year-olds. Did it just click for him because he's physically at his peak, or is it because he's been in college for 4 years and it clicked? Those are all questions that you have to answer. And I think what helps me with Jaden Daniels specifically is I've talked to coaches at LSU that say, no, what clicked was the work ethic. He started to understand what he had to do to be great. And he was in here every day working his ass off. He, gained like 15 pounds of muscle because he knew he needed to get better there. I can watch his 2022 tape and see him dropping his eyes and running around like crazy when he gets pressured. I watch him in 2023. Eyes are downfield. He gets pressured. He understands he has numbers, and he's layering it over the top to two really good receivers, and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.
I was about to say, man, he's got some good receivers
he's got
too.
Some dudes. Yeah. I always say, like, so did Joe Burrow. So did CJ Stroud. It's like, and I think last year someone asked Hendon Hooker about that, and he said, "It's not my fault my receivers get open." And he's right. It's not. It's like you would be dumb not to throw to them because they're open.
Yeah.
So
do you hit them in timing, and do you hit them accurately? Yeah.
And I think that's where, like, I love the analytics side of things. It helps me do my job, but there's no substitute to turning on the tape and seeing, man, I'm watching this guy make plays with his eyes and arm in the pocket that he never made before. And that's where, like, I get excited about his development.
Yeah, so you said something interesting earlier when you were talking about Caleb Williams and how you would potentially trade up for him. If one of those three guys that you mentioned aren't there when Washington, I guess, is picking at 4, is that right, Craig? 4?
Yeah, with where we are right now, they're picking 4th. Obviously, 4 games to go.
And obviously, how quarterbacks tend to go, and you seem very high on Sam Howell. Like, would you trade back out of that 4th pick if you make the decision to stay with Sam? And it does seem like that second tier is pretty meaty with some good football players in it, and you can get back out of there and still get a good football player.
I think trading back is certainly on the table, and I'm not trying to like hedge here at all. It really depends on what happens at 2-3. So let's say, just for fun, Chicago takes Caleb Williams, New England takes Drake May, the Arizona Cardinals take Marvin Harrison Jr. You're sitting at 4 with Olu Fashanu on the board. Just take him.
He's the first tier, right? Man. You got to take him.
Exactly, top tier. And I like Joe Alt as well, but the difference between those guys is significant enough for me that you don't risk it. You don't risk, hey, what if we move back? Especially where you have a division rival, the New York Giants, sitting at 5. Don't help them. Like, don't give them potentially a good player. So in that scenario, you take Fashanu and you feel great about it. And then round 2, you're like, hey, let's get some receivers in round 2. And this is a fun study. And you guys, if you get some downtime, do this. Look at the best left tackles in the NFL. Most of them were first-round picks.
Right.
Now, you want to look at the best wide receivers in the NFL? You got a laundry list of guys round 2, round 3. So, could you find, an AJ Brown type talent, the top round 2, or Deebo Samuel? Hell yeah, it happens every year. So,
especially if you this year too, right?
Fashanu, right. I had 8 wide receivers going to my round 1 mock draft. That would be a record. And there were like 2 or 3 more guys I probably could have fit in there. So the wide receiver class is so deep. And I know fans, Washington fans, you guys have a lot of needs. That's just where you're at. You're drafting 4. You obviously have some needs, but you can stack the board pretty well this year, I think. If you go tackle round 1, whether it's edge rusher or wide receiver in round 2, like there's good depth there.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask next is you actually have what I would consider potentially a small number of quarterbacks, only 4, I think, going, or 3, 4, 4 going in your first round, all of whom are going in the top 10, as you've got J.J. McCarthy from Michigan going very high. But Bo Nix is going to be in the mix. Michael Penix from Washington is going to be in the mix. There might be a couple of others by the time the process is over. And then you have Washington sitting at the top of the second round with their pick and the Bears pick. Who are some of the guys that like, how would you grade like the position Washington is in with those 2 picks at the top of the second round? Because you said there's maybe not as many guys with the first round grade this year, but is that next second tier deep enough at the right positions that it could be extremely beneficial to Washington?
Yeah, definitely. And, I'll go back to, this is a great class for wide receivers. It's a great class for offensive tackles. So, and especially, the right tackle position, I know Andrew Wiley's there. The jury, I think, is out on the job that he's done this year, but the draft is deep enough at those positions that you could be pretty excited. Corner is going to be deep in round 2. I know, last year getting Forbes in the first round, we're definitely going to see a new defensive system in there. So that will be interesting to see, how well Forbes fits with whatever comes in. But I think at those, what you would consider premium positions, there is that good depth. So top of round 2, probably not at quarterback is the one thing I'm going to say, because I do think those 4 guys are going to go fairly early. Bo Nix might even go late first round. I think we could see a team try to jump back up if you like Bo Nix. The guy started 60 games in college. So anything you want to see, you can see it on tape. SEC, Pac-12, he played both. Really good at attacking outside the hashes, really good intermediate timing. He's athletic. I could see him having a strong enough pre-draft process that someone late first round tries to get back in, and to make him the guy. Especially because I think last time I counted, there were like 12 teams that could make a change at quarterback, and we're talking about 4 going in the first round. So Bo Nix and Michael Penix become pretty valuable in that scenario, especially where the free agent quarterbacks this year, Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill. Like I don't know that anybody's beating down any doors to sign those guys, especially with Kirk coming off an injury. So it does get pretty interesting on how are you going to fill those quarterback needs with, again, another long conversation. NIL has changed quarterback in the draft. The days of guys, okay, hey, it's been 4 years, I'll enter the draft. That's gone. We got Tyler Show going 7 years in college at this point. And so that middle market of quarterbacks is Cam Ward, Washington State is transferring. He would be a guy that would normally be in the draft, and you would say, hey, that's a good mid-round quarterback. Now those guys aren't jumping in. And so it feels like we're going to get to this point where there's going to be round 1 quarterbacks, and then there's going to be late day 3 quarterbacks, and there might not be a whole lot in the middle.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about the offensive side of the ball here. In terms of defensive, like blue chippers, are there any? And do you think that, like, kind of, one of the positions that was really kind of rich last year was that edge rusher in that early second round? Are there going to be guys there that can play some football?
Yeah, so it's a light class defensively, especially in terms of blue chippers. I would say Turner at Alabama and Latu at UCLA have the potential to be there. Again, with Latu, medicals are going to be a huge part of that evaluation. I think particularly the edge rusher spot is interesting this year because you're going to have guys who are there early round 2. They're going to be values. It's just a matter of whether they can be a scheme fit. Like Chop Robinson at Penn State is fascinating to me because his production was through the roof. I think his pass rush win rate was like 20%. But he's listed at 255 pounds, and I don't believe that for a second. I think he's 240, 245 is what he looks like on the field. So that's just going to be a question of, hey, he's undersized, however you want to slice it, even if he puts on some weight throughout the process. So you're going to have guys like that, who are available potentially top of round 2. It's just, do you like the scheme fit? On the opposite end, Chris Braswell from Alabama, he's been overshadowed by Will Anderson Jr., overshadowed by Dallas Turner. He's just a really good player, plays with power, sets the edge well, has, that first step burst. He's probably going to be available early round 2, especially if you're running a defense where a guy has, really almost exclusively stood up in college. That could be something that's a really good fit depending on what kind of scheme you're running. So I do think there will be a conversation, maybe 3 to 4 guys at the edge position that are available. It's a very weak defensive tackle class, which I know you guys are, you've got 2 very, very good defensive tackles in there. But it's weak at safety and off-ball linebacker. It doesn't look like it's going to be super loaded this year either.
Last thing for you, Matt, and I can't believe I'm the one asking about this position, but when you talk about building around Howell, a tight end would be quite nice. So how's the tight end class look?
Brock Bowers is a stud. That's easy. That's the easiest evaluation maybe in this
Wow, that's
draft.
Great insight.
He's kind of an interesting one though, because he's a little undersized, right? Like he's not your 6'7" body type.
Stop.
We're just trying to paint a picture. I'm trying to paint a picture for the audience that when you think about stud tight end, you think about like the 6'7", kind of Rob Gronkowski body type. Yeah, Travis Kelce. Yeah, he's different, even if he's still awesome.
Bowers is different. 6'4", 245. I think he's very similar to George Kittle.
I was going to say Kittle. Look at you, Matt. I knew we'd get along so well.
Right. And honestly, it's a similar play style of that, like, rough tumble, I'm going to run over you. It's not the, like, pretty boy Kyle Pitts, like, split me out, I'll run vertical. It's like, no, I'm going to run through you if you get in front of me. He's, great effort as a blocker, very, very strong. So he's going to go early. I'm obsessed with Jatavian Sanders at Texas. I don't know if he's going to declare for the draft yet, but I think he's a top 40 player if he comes out. He's more of your, motion guy, flex tight end, really, really good up the seam. He is a good downfield blocker. He's not an inline guy. That's just not his game. But it's a weak tight end class, which is understandable because last year was maybe the greatest tight end class of all time. And we're seeing those early benefit, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, like so many of those dudes are just blowing up already. Cade Otton is having a quietly really good year in Tampa. So as much as there are teams, I live south of Kansas City and I'm like banging the table, like guys, should have drafted a tight end last year and they didn't. And now it's like, Kelsey's getting triple teamed, and because you don't have any wide receivers, it'd be great to have a tight end in the wings for your 35-year-old, who's now dating the most famous person on the planet. This is not the year to try to find that starter level tight end if you're not drafting in the top 35.
We'll see how many times the Commanders are drafting in the top 35. That's still in play, so we'll see.
You might be
Matt
okay.
Miller. Matt Miller. You can read his work, ESPN.com. The mock draft out and now, the first one. Many more to come. And Matt, hopefully this is the first of at least a couple conversations that we'll have between now and April.
Yeah, let's do it. Senior Bowl is a month and some change away, so a lot to talk about, guys. Always a lot to talk about.
No doubt about it. All right, thanks, Matt, and thanks everybody for listening to Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.